Hey, David Brewster here in an episode of Chordplay, and this is part 2 of the Chords of Pink Floyd. And the very first Chordplay episode I ever created was Pink Floyd, mainly because when I was younger, when I heard Pink Floyd, my ears perked up. I wasn't prepared for that sound, the mellow, moody, kind of ambient, all the drones and the synth and the guitar, and this dark kind of undercurrent or core of their music. Almost everything they recorded and released was very dark, minor keys and really interesting progressions and chords. I'm a huge David Gilmour fan, so there's a reason why number one the first episode was Pink Floyd, simply because they really did kind of perk up my ears. I've had a lot of requests for Pink Floyd's music, as a guitar instructor and then also as a performer too, playing in cover bands. It seems like everybody loves Pink Floyd. Maybe not everybody, but there's a lot of people that love Pink Floyd, whether they're musicians or not. And there is a secret weapon, it's right in front of your face, but most people don't even really notice, who the secret weapon of Pink Floyd was. And obviously David Gilmour is essential, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, even Syd Barrett, back in the day. He really was the creative spark that kind of fueled, Pink Floyd's music and their legacy. Even in his absence, they were writing a lot of this music for him, But Richard Wright, the keyboardist, is actually the secret weapon, or was the secret weapon, in Pink Floyd's music. And he added this depth, jazz changes, classical changes, and, these chord voicings and all this stuff. He really gave it like another layer or another, this depth in their music that, if he wouldn't have been in the band, they still would have sounded great. But he really did. It was the icing on the cake, or whatever, the cherry on top, where it was like, wow. And it really did propel a lot of their music in that kind of ambient and atmospheric direction, which is so inspiring. I've had a lot of, students over the years ask about David Gilmour's playing style, and they always seem a little confused when they come, to a lesson and they're saying things like, well, he just plays a lot of pentatonic and blues licks, and they scratch their head. And yes, a lot of what David Gilmour, plays and did with Pink Floyd is blues-based, blues rock-based. But it was Richard's keyboard influence and those textures and chords that gave David Gilmour's lead lines and licks this different sound. It's kind of behind the scenes, instead of just a standard, A major chord or A minor chord, Richard would add like ninths or 13ths or 11ths or whatever, and it would give it this other, flavor or other sound. And that's kind of the secret. Richard was kind of changing things, the foundation of some of those chord progressions in the songs. And then when Gilmour, would play a solo or something, it would react differently than, say, a standard blues or a rock, because you're hearing these classical and jazz, chord changes. This episode of Chordplay is going to be a little bit different because everything in this lesson is going to be used in a clean tone. So there's no overdrive or distortion. There's a couple examples that are technically, I believe, doubled, acoustic and electric. I'm just going to play everything on electric guitar. But I wanted to give you a heads up that this is a completely clean, episode of Chordplay. So kick off your distortion, kick off your overdrive, dial up, some clean tones, add some reverb and delay or whatever you want to add. But no distortion on this lesson. The intro, that was Another Brick in the Wall Part 1 from The Wall. And of course, that song's cut up into different sections. Most people are most familiar with Part 2 of Another Brick in the Wall. But that's the kind of drone, it seems like it just sustains that open D, kind of bouncy delay pattern. That goes on forever. And then a little bit later in the song, you'll hear Gilmour kind of sliding these double stops and little partial chords, little pieces. just sliding back and forth between different parts of D minor. Just that open D, it just keeps going. And then you'll hear a slight mutation. Right there it's D minor up to E minor and back. And then A minor up to B minor and back. And then right there it's going to go from C to C sharp. And then you'll hear B flat to B, back to B flat. You know, with that D root. And that's a really cool, you know, part of that song, and it may not be as familiar as part 2, but there's some interesting, you know, those bouncy delay parts and all those slid, you know, try it. It's really cool. The next example comes from Eclipse, you know, the last song on Dark Side of the Moon. And while Gilmour may not be some crazy neoclassical shredder, he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. You know, little studio tricks and layering techniques and, you know, all kinds of stuff. I mean, aside from the fact he has phenomenal tone and feel and phrasing, you know, he's a master guitarist. But in this, you know, song, there's actually a split. There's a bunch of layers and layers of guitar parts. But the two kind of primary, or the foundation of the tune, there's a lower part and a higher part. And when the higher part and lower part are combined, it's beautiful. You know, it's like magic. But the lower part is this. You know, pretty simple. You know, D major, and then a C6-9. B flat, a B flat major 7, sharp 11, and then just A7. And that's revealing a little bit of the secret weapon, you know, the influence of Richard Wright, because you have, you know, very stock, you know, basic chords, D major and A7 combined, you know, with a C6-9 and a B flat major 7, sharp 11. So two of those chords are very standard, and two of them are a little unusual. But when you put them together, it's magic. Right? So that's guitar 1. I'm using a TC Electronic Ditto looper so I can loop both guitar parts together. So I'm going to play guitar 2 combined with guitar 1, which would be something like this. Something like that. And there's so much going on. There's just swirls and swirls of all these layers and additional guitar parts and, you know, keyboards and all this stuff. Of course, the vocals and everything too. But that part complements the lower part because we had, you know, D major here, and then like a D over C, or, you know, D7. And then way up here, you know, really cool. It's a B flat 6, sharp 11. And then right there, you know, that's A7 again, but way up here. You know, an octave higher. But I love those two parts combined. It's so cool. Next up is Hey You from The Wall, and I've seen some really funky ways of playing this song. I've seen everything from using capos to, you know, like splitting guitar parts into two. But it's something like this. There's an interesting, really interesting progression happening there. So it's kind of like E sus2 to E minor. I guess E sus2 over B to E minor over B. Because technically that B note right there is your lowest note. And the picking pattern's kind of weird too. And the way you're kind of, changing that note and you're also kind of picking through it while it happens. Something like that. And then move back here, and then this is technically going to be, what, D minor add 9 over A to D minor over A. Something like that. That's a very haunting, guitar part, and the picking pattern's kind of weird, the chord forms are a little strange, and it is tricky to get that together. Next up is There Anybody Out There from The Wall, and this is one of those segue songs from The Wall. And there is some spoken word, in the beginning, is there anybody out there, or whatever. But then it turns into like a little classical or Spanish guitar kind of piece. And this is near the end of the song. It's like this. Something like that. But it starts with A minor, and you're really just starting from the D string, so it's A minor over E, technically. And then F major 7 right here. And then an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. And then back to F major 7. Back to the A minor over E. A D7 sus2, and then a C6, and then what, A minor over B, and then just finish with A minor, and then he plays A minor way up here. So one more time all the way through. Definitely reminds me of like classical guitar or Spanish guitar. It also reminds me of James Bond a little bit. With that progression. But that's really cool. I love stuff like that. Alright, next up is Welcome to the Machine from Wish You Were Here. And I used to play this in an acoustic duo for a while. And, the guitar is kind of almost like an afterthought, or it's in the background. It's not really a guitar song. Definitely a vocal song. There's a lot of synth and keyboard, kind of layers and drones. And the guitar is in there, it's just kind of hidden, or it's part of the foundation. But when I played the song in an acoustic duo, I was the only guitarist, so I filled it out, and I always thought it was kind of interesting that we played, this song without the keyboards, so it had a different twist. There were no machines, in our version. But the song loosely is related to these two chords. E minor add 9, and then C major 7. And those two chords back to back in the progression have an unsettling sound. Because those two chords are not supposed to go together, but they work. But then during the song, you'll hear this part. dreamy, and you've got this kind of melodic line. And you're just changing that single note on the bottom and letting, you know, the top strings ring open. You know, very dreamy and atmospheric. I love that stuff. And then, you know, after that part at the end of that line, then go to C major 7 right there. And then the E minor add 9. I like playing it that way, so that way you can strum it. You know, during that part, you don't really hear that A string in there. Kind of secret or clever, you know, muting and dampening in there, but that's really essential to keep parts, you know, kind of ringing and flowing like that. I'm going to end this lesson revisiting the song that I featured first in the first episode of Chordplay, and this is from Shine On You Crazy Diamond from Wish You Were Here. This is one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs. And in the first episode of Chordplay, we talked about this. You know, the G minor 13, or G minor 13 over B flat, you know, in this song. You know, during the intro, and there's this huge extended intro guitar solo, you know, keyboard. I mean, it goes on for a long time, and then finally the song, you know, starts to pick up. And Shine On You Crazy Diamond is broken up into different parts, you know, part 1, part 2. And the part we're going to look at is actually during the sax solo. I think this might be part 5 of the song, but it's this part. Right off the bat, I love that. And all of that's based around G. So that's G minor, you know, G minor 13 right there, loosely. The first chord for sure. But then we're adding some other things there. But that first cycle, it's all played over G. That G root, and then it changes to C, and then you'll have that. Now if you want to cheat, you could actually play the open G string in there just to bring out a little bit of that G13. You know, it's not as strong as the low root, but at least you can hear that G in there. There I'm totally doing a Hendrix rap to grab, you know, the C note, which, you know, Gilmour didn't play that. David Gilmour is literally in the song just doing this. You know, behind the sax solo. But it's the keyboard and the bass that's changing, you know, that root note. But I'm just trying to find a way to do it by myself, like that. And that obviously makes that much harder to play. But I love little challenges like that, where I just, you know, try to challenge myself and see, can I play, you know, more than one part right there? Or can I add some of these, you know, bass notes in to fill out the sound if I'm playing it by myself? If I was playing it with a band, I would just do this. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Pink Floyd, and it should be obvious once again, I'm a really big Pink Floyd and David Gilmour fan. I love prog rock. I love a lot of, music from England. And and there's other things too. I love acoustic and I love blues and I love classical music and there's a whole bunch of stuff. But Pink Floyd, once it hit me, it took me a little while. Like when I was younger and I was listening to Van Halen and stuff, it was a little bit too slow. It was too dreamy and it didn't really click at first because I was used to fast tempo and shredding and all this crazy stuff. And then once I kind of burned, some of that out of my system, I locked onto it where I was like, I heard it and it sounded different, and I think it was, the hits, Money and Comfortably Numb and some of these songs that kind of grabbed me. And then when I started, digging deeper and got into Animals and some of those albums, I realized, wow, these guys are phenomenal, and I became obsessed. And yeah, it sucks that Richard, passed away. And I've definitely been following, what Gilmour's been up to and some of the stuff that Roger Waters has been up to. And it would be nice to have some kind of reunion again or something, but they've already done that multiple times. I think the best thing to just kind of let it be and respect their legacy, instead of trying to reform the band. Just go back and listen to their music and listen to those albums, and that should be enough to inspire you and kind of motivate you, with those ideas and those sounds. So anyway, I could talk about Pink Floyd all day, just like Jimmy Page and Van Halen and Vito Bratta and some of the other people too. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.